That was quick. Damn.
It was quick.
We got through 4 of them.
Yeah, it's like I was mid-sentence and it was like I just fell into another room.
You got teleported to a new place.
I love this. Oh, if I could just do that. Oh, I think I would have them teleport me over to Normal Town to the new location of the seafood restaurant. Oh my God.
I didn't know we had a new seafood.
I don't think I did either.
Foursquare is back. Is it Foursquare? Is that the name of it?
Square One?
Square One is back.
Yeah.
I had an extraordinary birthday dinner from there, and I'm like, oh, I missed them. I knew I missed them.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, we are going to go ahead and continue. That time went by extremely fast. And so I hope you were able to, I also realized halfway through, or at the beginning of ours, I probably murdered the directions and the context, but I promise I have more information I can send you. But more importantly, I hope that this started conversations. Honestly, there's never enough time. I don't think you can ever team build or talk about your strengths too much, because in many of our capacities, we're working in teams for the greater good, not just our roles on the board. And so I am, aware that some of us may have gotten through all of the questions. You may have gotten through one of them. You may have looked specifically at the behaviors, or you may have looked generally at the categories. All of that is okay. We just wanted to be sure that conversation was facilitated. And so as we wrap up this activity, I am going to open up the floor for you to share, some of the things that you did get to. Were there some strengths that you noticed across your team? Maybe there were some challenges that you noticed across your team, but you also identified some ways to overcome those challenges. Were there some similarities between you and your colleagues in your group? So I'm going to open the floor up and
Nicole.
Oh.
So I'm just really excited because through my group, I noticed that we really saw each other in a very positive light, and it was a much better light than we saw for ourselves. And so just being new on the board and kind of sitting through and listening to some of the things that the board wanted to build, it was really refreshing to hear our other board members really think positive and really play up on our strengths. So I just thought that was super cool to see.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. You can just jump in there because I sometimes not see the hand.
Okay, and it's Sernona. Well, what I was saying to Ms. Palmer when we first went out, I said, I'm a little confused, not by the directions, but I could hear Dr. Dykeman saying, either end can be a strength. And so I think sometimes we are so fixated on what's right and what right looks like that we might not recognize the strength and the value. So as I was looking, I kept hearing her say, well, there could be a strength on any end. And that I had struggled with that, but that was good for me because it just kind of pushes us to see the value in how people might do things differently and how we have this prescribed way of how things should be done or how people should conduct themselves. And that's not always the case. So just looking at, and that was what my struggle was when I said, oh, no, this isn't making sense, but it did, but it just makes you look outside of a box that I think we create for ourselves and for others.
Love it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
So I have many years of and many jobs in my 30-year career at the phone company. So we always had to go through exercises like this. It felt good to kind of have a flashback, but I really like the idea of, especially the fact that there is no right or wrong in terms of how you see yourself or how you see others. The challenge is, how do you actually bridge that gap and be able to have a conversation with them and then respect them for their opinions and where they are. And so that was what I took away from this exercise. It was a very good way to quickly assess our willingness to work together and to come to some agreement. So you might want to send this up the road to the White House right about now. Thank you.
the way I see it also is that I'm just a believer. Too much of anything can be harmful. Just tied along with the last two ladies said. Just being able to see our strengths and what we think our strengths and challenges are, because other people may see us totally different. I think that is very helpful that we get to know each other and know where our thought processes are, so that we can better understand each other and better, relate to each other. So this was an awesome activity. And I'll let Karina can share where we are similar as a group. Put you on the spot, newbie.
Put me on Front Street.
Who was in the group? Dr. Mattis, you, Miss Gallagher, and who else?
Mr. Dave.
Mr. Davis. Okay.
So the two strengths that we all found were agreeableness and extroversion, which I think everybody on the board has got those two, and we just use them differently.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we talked some about I think it was the extroversion, Miss Hall and Miss Davis, and there was something mentioned that I thought was very interesting, and it's probably a conversation for a different time. But it was this idea that I rated us as closer to like introversion, but like it does get confused, like because we are public officials, so there, people have this perception that we just really. Well, we do love people, but like that we really get our energy from being around a lot of people. And one thing that Ms. Davis said is that, there is that difference, right, between the personal persona, right, the identity as that elected official, but then like your personality. And sometimes when there is such a drastic difference, like when you're forced to be like, you're having to be on all the time and things like that, I think that's where stress comes in at, when there's some tension between like the personal, like who we are just sort of as like people, but then like when the role calls for us to be something different.
Yeah, that's definitely me. Like I am so introverted in my normal self that I have to shut down. So it's really cool to see the difference in the professional side and the personal side, and now having to figure out how to navigate that in this new role.
How many people rated themselves as more extroverted? Just
Not me.
Not me either.
Not me either.
It was just the three of us? Cool.
Now, wait a minute now. Tawana and Karina, y'all kind of went on the extroverted side.
So I gave myself like this same score for all the areas.
You were playing it safe, Karina.
Much like Miss Davis, that I explained myself the same way, that at home I'm chill. Like I don't really have to be around a lot of people, and a lot of times I'm drained. With the combination like of my job, being around a lot of people. I love people, don't get me wrong, but it's problem solving, giving a lot of attention to, and then being on the board, same, we have to work together, and watching myself, and and sometimes overthinking, and it's hard because I am naturally an introvert, and my heart still beats fast whenever I speak. My heart is like, it's jumping out of my chest. Even still today, I don't know when I will get over this. So I'm drained after being in crowds and speaking out. So I do what I need to do for what needs to be done. But after that, I just want to go and chill and take a nap.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like I've put myself in situations where, whether as a union organizer or as a school teacher, and even now in terms of knocking on doors for candidates, I mean, all three of those things are really out there, and I can get nervous like I was every day I went to school to teach, I would have a little pit in my stomach, but I would just kind of like pump myself up and you know, walk in the hallway and man, I was pumped, you know, and so to me, I always said it was mind over matter.
Mm.
But so those of us that think we are extroverts, it's because we get energy from the interactions with other people, and that's what fuels us. But if a lot of the members of the board are actually drained by that process, that means we all need to be a little bit kinder to each other, knowing how much it's costing you to do this. I mean, so gosh, I need to be a lot more respectful of how you guys are feeling when I'm talking and talking and talking and talking and getting energy and sucking it all out of you, right? So that's terrible.
Like the energy vampires and everything.
Yeah.
Exhausted by. That's funny.
No, but it's like, but I think this is where the conversation, that's why it is important for us to think through what do we bring in what situations, and to look at these as differences. But like differences, so there's this idea that's discussed in like human growth and development literature, like difference means deficit. That's our tendencies just as humans, but difference doesn't have to mean deficit. It means different. And so it means that how do we as a team recognize who we are and where our teammates are, and then how do we work through any challenges that may come up, and then but how do we capitalize on strengths, right? Because there are times where we have to have someone who gets their energy from being around people. Like we have to have that energy. There are times where we have to have someone who is just direct. You can't have a person like talking. I tend to like talk in circles sometimes, and it's like, no, you got to have someone who's direct, even if it's, even if it seems crude, but we have to have a person who's direct. We have to have a person who's organized. And so it's like, really, how do we capitalize on those strengths, and how do we have ongoing conversations about those strengths and challenges when they present themselves as challenges? Well, I know that it is 6:47. I know Dr. Yeager, you just mentioned something, but I was going to say we hadn't heard fully from you and Dr. Anderson, as well as Dr. Dykeman. So before we wrap up and I turn the floor over to Dr. Thomas to lead the conversation on strategic planning, I do want to be sure to check in with you all to see if there's any, if there are any additional things that you have that you would like to contribute to the conversation.
Please, because I want to know you.
So Mumby and I are extroverts and Kara is not. We had an interesting discussion about agreeableness. I think all of us are sensitive to wanting to be liked and wanting to be, and I should not speak for my colleagues, but I mean, we talked about wanting to be liked and so therefore trying to be agreeable, but then I at least recognize that stubbornness is not an agreeable part of the trait, and so I'm probably lower on the agreeable scale than I think I am.
But also that being stubborn can also be a good thing and a necessary thing, and always being agreeable isn't necessarily the best thing.
Right.
And then we got to conscientiousness for all three of us, and we all rated ourselves the same on conscientiousness, which is like an 8. And then I'm going to show you guys this. And Nicole, this isn't really getting to know me because this is not a thing I normally do, but I had to rate myself high on conscientiousness because over the pandemic, I sorted all my kids' Legos by color and put them in these bins. And so this makes me seem like especially conscientious, but it is an aberration. It's not like my whole house looks like that in any way.
Like you can never come to my house when the world opens back up because it will drive you crazy if your kids.
No, it wouldn't. It just is like mine were in these 2 giant bins forever, and this was just one of those things I started doing, and then I just kept doing it.
That's pretty cool.
All right. Well, Dr. Anderson, did you have any additional things to add?
No, they pretty much covered it. We didn't get as deep into the questions as we had hoped. We kind of talked a lot more about the first three, so they covered it all.
Awesome.
I have chocolate if anybody wants some. I have fruit bowls.
Miss Gallagher is gonna like have like Miss Palmer teleport us some chocolate through like the rooms, you know.
So I have 2 more bites from my Reese's.
Miss Davis has been eating the Reese's for the past 45 minutes.
Taking me get one and it was gone in 3 bites.
So we'll go ahead and turn over the discussion to Dr. Thomas. After that, I think is a conversation on gathering stakeholder data. But I would just encourage you to keep this information in mind. Of course, there are people out there that do more formal personality assessments, but even the conversations are helpful. I always tell have the discussions with my students. If you've ever applied for any job, you've taken a personality assessment of some sort, even when they ask you like, hey, if a customer comes and they're upset,
That's right.
what do you do? Like they're trying to get an idea of how you handle situations and problems. So feel free to share this information. At some point, I will share the reference for just the book that I pulled the content from. And I'm happy to share any additional information that's needed. Thank you for your participation. And I'll turn the floor over to Dr. Thomas.
Thank you. This was really good. I'll be analyzing myself throughout the night now and trying to guess how you all will respond. So
we need to enter our ideas into a table and share it, right?
Right. And as we move into talking about strategic planning, this is perfect, just looking at how each of us respond to, interpret, react regarding different areas. I looked and Dr. Dykeman had already taken the strategic plan and put the committees into nice categories, which is kind of like the Legos, Dr. Dykeman. And so, being able to categorize that and see how does that fit, where does it fit? And so we have gone over our slightly revised plan with you all. We have Mr. Harris, who I am so grateful to for agreeing to be with us on a Friday evening. And we are just going to do a brief overview of where we are with the plan, and then want to just hear your thoughts, ideas, suggestions. The thing that I do like, and he and I were talking a little while you all were in groups, is that I've been going around now to every school virtually and just talking through our commitments as a district, our vision for our students, and then talking about our strategic priorities as a system. And what I've said to every school is, I want you, whether you're a cafeteria worker, a custodian, a teacher, a paraprofessional, a leader, someone in our finance office, to be able to look at this plan and see yourself somewhere and how your work in the district helps to advance the overall work of Clark County Schools and our board. And our attempt had been to take what we already had, but to just word it in a way that you should be able to walk into a classroom or walk into an office, and a person should, at a minimum, be able to tell you at least one of the priorities that their work is aligning to, and how what they're doing aligns to that work. In some areas, you should be able to speak to all 5 of those priorities. And I've noticed in our conversation as a board, and Ms. Davis has always pushed us to this, but I'm finding it to be a little easier, that when we're having conversations, we can see how whatever it is we're discussing fits within our strategic priorities. And we're seeing that now as a cabinet. So when we're talking, we really are, it's not just something we print and it's really pretty and glossy and it sits on the shelf, but we're saying, whoa, hold on, how does this fit into where we say we're trying to go? And if it doesn't, should we be doing it? And if we feel strongly that we should be doing it, then we need to look at our plan and really understand why this doesn't fit. So I've really been pleased to see that it has honestly become a roadmap for how we're doing our work, and look forward to moving forward with how we then are monitoring that. And Mr. Harris can tell us more about that. Mr. Harris, I will be quiet and turn it over to you.
Right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me on this Friday night.
Good evening.
Glad to join you on a board retreat. So as Dr. Thomas said, we're just going to talk a little bit about the strategic plan. I believe you may have received a copy, but I'm going to share it on the screen. So a couple of things just to really talk about this process. We developed a strategic plan in the midst of, the COVID-19 pandemic. We had to find ways to get feedback back from our stakeholders, to engage with our school leaders and our community members around what did they want our priorities to be. And though I'm not going to share the entire PowerPoint, I do just want to draw everyone's attention to, if you can see this slide, back when we did our first community stakeholder survey back in spring 2020 and a follow-up in the fall. These were, we had to take the question that we asked our stakeholders was, what do you want us to focus on for the next 2 years? What's one thing you want to see come out of the Clark County School District? And then, we took that information and we categorized it to find ways to ensure that we were addressing the needs, not just of our staff, but of our local community. And so that was just a reminder, just to show you where the survey results came from. And out of that came our 5 strategic priorities. As Dr. Thomas mentioned, she's been out doing the world tour of CCSD to all of our schools and our staff. And as she said, our goal was that we wanted all of our staff, but as well as our community members, to see themselves in this plan. They can talk about it. You can ask a question, where are we in regards to community collaboration? How's our fiscal health and our fiscal responsibility? And so what I'm showing you today is again, draft document that just really highlights the information that was requested at the board meeting from the fall about our strategic priorities. What I do want to say before going through each item is kind of where we are, what our next steps are. So I'm in the process of working with some of our other districts around the state and actually some across the country. I'm in the process of observing their progress monitoring systems. And so part of this process is going to be really important for our community stakeholders and you as our board to be able to always access, where are we in our strategic plan? You should be able to easily access and see, if we're saying we want 80% or more of our third grade students to be on grade level, you should be able to click that on a Tuesday, a Friday, a March, a November, and you should be able to pull that data point and see where we are. And so I'm working with several folks and I'm learning how to create a really creative but integrative dashboard that you all can use as a board, our staff can use as a board, and the surrounding community can see to hold us accountable, but also to celebrate our successes, because we're going to be working really hard to make sure we reach these goals. So really excited about that opportunity. So that will be coming soon. But I did want to say, I know you all have not seen this document yet, but it kind of is our working draft, as it says. So our first strategic priority being student achievement. Each strategic priority has a number next to it just to kind of say a description of what it is. So our student achievement descriptor is that we want to prepare every student for college and career success. So, we have many people who don't speak education. When we get down and start talking about GKIDS and milestones, and that may not be the language, but we want everybody to know what we're saying is we want to prepare every student for college and career success. So we're saying keep it simple. Everybody understands that, everybody knows that. So you'll see in each strategic priority, there's simple language that anyone can understand, from the youngest to the oldest to the most educated, everyone can understand that. So there are 3 goals, and I do want to, Dr. Thomas, would you like me to take questions throughout or kind of pause between each strategic priority? How would you like me to?
Dr. Gant, what's your preference? What do you all think is easier? Is it easier, since this is really work time rather than presentation time? My thought would be we could do it maybe by priority area, rather than having to get through all 5 priorities. Sure. Because really the purpose of this is to get your feedback.
I think that would be good if the rest of the board is okay, or if there's a consensus with that.
Mr. Harris, I do want to jump in just for one moment. I went to Cedar last night. I'm trying to do better with balancing my time, and they had a JV game. Actually, they were playing Central, but I went over and I got stopped by a paraprofessional from the Classic City, and I missed the entire first half of the game because she wanted to talk about their data. And she's now working as a behavior interventionist and some other type specialist. And she said, we've been talking about our numbers and we're coming off that list. And we had this whole conversation, but it was because they are looking at this data, and she said, I told Dr. Gorman, tell me how many kids we need to have who are passing this test. And I'm going to tell her how many I'll personally be responsible for. And I was like, wow. And you know, this is a classified person, but it was what I said, this is what we're talking about. So today, when I met with their team in Career Academy, I called her name out, and I'm sure that was, you know, affirming for her, but like she was able to talk about assessments. She was able to talk about their numbers. And she said, this is not only going to help the kids at Classic City, but this is going to help y'all meet that goal. I was like, you're right. She said, because what we do helps you all. And I said, you're exact. But she was so excited, but to see that level of personal and professional ownership, and to be able to talk to me specifically about the graduation rate of their kids at Classic City, I was like, now this is what we have to have happen. And you're right, Mr. I mean, that's that level of ownership. And for it's not a principal issue. It's not just a board member issue. It's not just our issue. We all have to own that work if we're really going to move it. So I'm quiet again, Lawrence. I will mute myself.
No, ma'am, please feel free to jump in. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that goes back to the idea of better together. We want everyone to see themselves in this plan. A strategic plan that's too complicated is not understood and doesn't move forward. And so we want to make this as simple as possible, take some of our goals from our previous plan and integrate it into this one. So our first strategic priority is student achievement. And so our goals, we have 3. 80% or more of third grade students demonstrating on grade level proficiency in literacy. And so I remember there was a question before, why 80%? Why not 100%? And of course, we want to strive for 100% in all categories, but there's always this balance between what's achievable, so a SMART goal, versus what is aspirational. And so if you see, we have our baseline data here. We know our data, 37.2% is where we are now. State average is 48.3%, but we want to be at 80%. So I know, you know, as you go through here, you'll see that's how we've aligned the data. We don't want to just be higher than the state at 48.3. We want at least 80% of our students. And so our goals are still very much aspirational, but also achievable. The ways we plan on getting there, each goal has strategies listed under it. There are many more. Oh, go for it, Dr. Yeager.
I was just going to ask if you could make the image a little bit larger. I got my new glasses today, but I still have a hard time there. Thank you. That's better.
Right, there you go. Perfect. So each goal has strategies. Now, these are not all the strategies. One of the things that we look forward to doing is working with our teams in different departments to start, as Dr. St. Thomas was saying, each person seeing themselves in the plan, but thinking about how does your work impact this key performance indicator that we've listed here? How does your work impact moving literacy and on grade level proficiency for third grade students? And so, of course, you know, although we're still in that process of doing that work, part of it is, of course, we want, as the board approves the plan and, you know, we make revisions to it, we want to make sure that all of our staff know exactly how their work impacts moving the needle for this data point. So for, again, third grade literacy, some of the strategies are ensuring children are kindergarten ready. We know that's a really important indicator. You can't, you know, want students to be on grade level proficiency in literacy and start in the third grade teaching reading skills. You have to start earlier. So early childhood is a focus. And then using research-based practices just to make sure that we're training our teachers to support those students and to support the families who are supporting the kids in the community. So this is our first goal, first goal under student achievement. There are 3 to 4 per total. So there's about 24 goals. So I'm going to go through each.
So is there a time element to that goal?
Yes.
Yeah, 80% by what is there? Yeah, give me an idea of what.
And I was going to jump in, and Mr. Harris, you please jump in with me. So, you know, we've gone back and forth on this, right? And so initially we had a goal that we felt was achievable within a year. And if you all recall, and some of our board members being new weren't on for this conversation, but we had some discussion as a group about should your goal be attainable or should your goal be aspirational? And, you know, when you're developing SMART goals, they tell you they should be strategic and measurable and attainable. So what we have gone back now and done is try to have a blend of both. And this is looking at a 3-year effort. And so pushing ourselves for the next 3 years, realizing that getting from 37% to 80% is huge. But if we can, make a 15 or so % gain for the next 3 years, that gets us close to where we're trying to be. And we could, with really strategic work and getting out of a pandemic, have greater progress than that. So we have decided to look at this as a 3-year versus a 1 year, and have something that we do feel that we can reach with strategic work and consistent work, but not have it something that looks like, oh, well, you just want 45 or 50% of your kids, because that's not the case. We want it for all of them, but we want to, be realistic in what we are able to accomplish. Mr. Harris, did I leave something out on that?
No, I'm glad you said that. I apologize. I meant to say that in the beginning, that we did go ahead and extend this plan beyond a year, to be a 3-year strategy. So that those timelines will appear when my apologies. I meant to update that. So I'll update each goal with the timeline.
Can I
Dr.
just
Yeager?
add though, can I add something that, if you're gonna, I think we absolutely should be pouring energy into early childhood education. I'm not questioning that at all, but early childhood education is not going to reach the kids who are going to be in 3rd grade 3 years from now. Those are the kindergarten, 1st grade, and 2nd grade kids, right? So how are we going to reach those kids? I guess that's the research-based literacy part. But if we put all of our eggs into the early childhood education, we're not going to see results for 6 years instead of 3 years.
Oh yeah, agree 100%. And I think that's where, we have the second strategy here, but I know each of our departments is also still adding strategies that we're going to use to reach the goal. So these are only 2, but we're definitely, by the end of this, there are, counseling is going to have a strategy that impacts this. Almost every department, in a sense, that's especially in the instructional service department. And we're looking at ESOL students, ESOL department, Title I. So we haven't yet started to build those strategies with some of our staff members, mainly because we wanted to make sure the board was, on board with the goals that were listed before our team dived deep into. So how do you see yourself moving the needle here? So you'll see once we really populate this with the strategies from each department, it's going to be a lot more. This is just a high level view from what, our directors and our administrators were able to plug in.
So I have a question about
I'm sorry, Ms. Gallagher, just to answer Dr. Yeager.
Okay.
I see what you're saying, and I've also made a note to that effect, that second strategy is also clearly directed at that goal. But if I'm capturing correctly, what you've said is that if we're starting only with early learning, how are we supporting those kids who are already now past that point? And what strategies do we have in place to make sure we get them, if they're 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, or maybe already in 4th grade? So in addition to using research-based literacy resources with Fidelity, what specific strategy will be in place to support those kids who are past that? Yeah, I'm with you. Okay.
And so that will feed me back into that 80%. I know that 100% is aspirational, but how do you tell which 20% what are the factors that are going to feed into that 20% we're going to miss, and how does that then impact the work of getting it done? And that's my concern. So when we say anything less than every child, then we kind of implied that some children we don't expect to meet this goal. But if our goal is to have every child career and college ready, then I would think that other 20% may be looking at a career kind of goal. But I would want us to be aspirational in the sense of 100% of our students. But in addition to being aspirational, I want us to be intentional in terms of how we're moving those students to this objective.
And I don't think
I'm concerned that is, and I struggle with this even in my class. And, I think I teach one of the easiest classes in the world, and I want 100% of all of them making 100, and so it's possible for them to do that. They have to simply work to do that, actually do the work. And so this is the piece that I struggle with, is if we're saying our goal is to have 80% up from 37, which is amazing, then I'm not sure what we learn from that. And then more importantly, I want to make sure that we're capturing what we learn on this pathway to getting them to that 80% so that that can be 100%. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think we have to be clear that the expectation when any teacher is teaching a child is that they work with them with that goal in mind, but also recognizing that you might have a kid who comes in, they're coming in at very different places. And so also recognizing growth versus complete mastery. And so there has to be room to allow for that growth and trying to catch those kids up, but knowing everyone unfortunately is not starting at the same place. And I think when we're sharing this plan publicly, we have to be clear that it's not saying, well, I'm only teaching to 8 of the 10, but recognizing that 2 of the 10 or 5 of the 10, if you look at another goal with college and career readiness, if you say every kid is going to finish college and career ready, but you have a 9th grader who has come in with no reading ability, the likelihood of that child being where they need to be in 4 years is not going to be the same as a child who comes into 9th grade on grade level. And so teaching all of those students with the level of rigor and expectation that we are maximizing for growth, and sometimes that even maximal growth might not be complete mastery. And so having to just be mindful that, unfortunately, if we're all starting in different places, it's not realistic to think that we're going to be at the same place, but yet teaching them like you think they're going to be at the same place.
And that's my bubble. That's the bubble that I've been chasing since I've been on the board. That's our reality. That is 100% our reality in almost every classroom every day. And so what are the innovative things that we're going to do to address that bubble? Because we are going to have kids showing up not ready and not already, on that pathway to success. And to me, that's our real work, is if we can figure out how to address that, to have those kids performing at some other, maybe there's a different measurement. Grade level performance is that's almost a code word, if you would, for what the state measures. You know what I'm saying? And I know we have to be really
right. That's what we have to do, but
we have to know that. But I don't know if that's the thing I want to drive our performance. I really want our performance to be about getting 100% of our kids at a better place at the end of the school year. And so again, if their path is not the conventional path, what do we have, or what are we creating to give them access to success away from that conventional path?
So when you look at, and I don't want us to get too distracted because then we're really getting into the operational work of our teachers and classrooms, but when you look at the other assessments that are done, and whether that is a Dibbles assessment or a BASC or basic reading level assessments, those assessments are going to capture that growth. And those assessments, that data is maintained regularly for teachers. And, that's data we look at, and that's data that's celebrated with our kids, so.
And yes, that's the kind of data maybe we want to also include in our measurements, because
and
again,
it will be. So that's there.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I'm saying. So this level of the plan is kind of the board level. But then we will share with you the entire, when you start talking about these progress indicators and get down into the specific hows, that information is in the plan. And it was in our old plan. When you look at like assessments that are given quarterly or twice a year. So that data is captured and will be shared with the board.
Okay. It just worries me that, again, when I see that 80%, it just,
I'll have to get back to Ms. Gallagher and then you, Mr. Davis. I'm sorry, because
okay,
Ms. Gallagher.
So I had to write it down. And now I got to remember how I was going to ask it. For the strategic plan, just for this one, the 80% or more, did y'all look back like to a point to where we ever had over 80% and then look at what that strategic plan looks like? And if we've never had more than 80%, or more third grade students who would demonstrate on grade level performance and literacy. Did y'all look at all the strategic plans and then like hold them up to the light, like one on top of the other, to make sure that we are not continuously doing new strategic plans that say the same thing year after year, hoping for new results?
So not exactly in that wonderful way you just described it, but I can tell you that we have struggled with getting to this place, and this is talking more from my hat as a principal than as a district leader, since the assessments have changed. When we made the shift from CRCT to milestones, it's when we started to see a significant downward spiral in how our students were performing. And so that test, the milestone, tests differently, but it requires a different level of thinking and application for our students. And so you've brought up a good point, and that's part of what I've been saying to all of the schools I've spoken to, and I'm going to start talking to different community groups, but we have to look for unconventional strategies. And I've said that if we've learned nothing from COVID, it should be that we cannot continue to apply old solutions to new problems. And I think that kind of is what you're saying, is that we have to look at, one, what is it our kids are expected to know? How are they expected to demonstrate that knowledge and understanding? And then how are we teaching them, one, so that they can do that, but also how are we preparing them to be able to respond in a way that they're being questioned? So I would still continue to argue that there are two issues, right? So one is knowledge and understanding, but the other issue is understanding what you're being asked. And so we have some students who are very capable, but they're not able to express that knowledge because of how they're being asked. That's the same issue that we see with standardized tests for many of our students of color. They have the content knowledge, but they're not able to express that on those assessments.
Right.
And so we have to ensure two things: that we're giving rigorous, relevant, responsive instruction daily, but also that we're equipping our students with the skills they need to respond to these assessments in a way that accurately measures what they know. And those are two things that we have to do simultaneously, but we really do need to look. So I have written down what you said and have captured that.
And my last part is in the strategic plan, because I'm reading through it now and it doesn't look like it's in there. Are we adding in components that allow for the level of flexibility that we currently have due to COVID for students who do not do well in traditional classrooms? Because this whole thing looks like we're going back to the old way to ensure that all of these goals get met.
I don't know if I completely got your question. I got part of it. Did you?
So we see that some students right now are thriving in a virtual environment, but the strategic plan doesn't allow, or is not included just in this draft, where we are allowing the space for students who are doing well virtually to still be captured, like with the level of flexibility that we're currently using during COVID.
Yes, we are doing that. And again, that will get down into some of the specific action steps, but we have a team that is meeting. I shared some data. The state is offering some resources for pilot schools to look at something similar to the Georgia Virtual Academy model.
Okay.
And we're looking at taking some of our funds and exploring that. And I've charged Mr. Gaskins with working with the team to explore additional options. And within that moves into looking at our Classic City High School model and how do we use that model in different ways to support students who learn differently. So, Classic City might have a model like they have now, but part of that model could be a Clark County virtual schools model that's run by Dr. Gorman within the Classic City. So we're looking at, and that kind of aligns back to what we had talked about before when we were talking about a change in Classic City High School. is that we need to determine a more comprehensive way of addressing those different learning needs of our students. So that is something that we're doing as well. And unfortunately, and this is why we have to start, we look at the action steps, because this is broader, but then the actual action steps will attack some of that. And that's why it has to be a living, breathing document, because different things come up. You know, and a good example, and I'm trying to monitor the time because we have a lot I know to do, but a good example of what you were just talking about, Mr. Harris and Mr. Gaskins and I were working this week, looking at the school calendar. And we were talking about how we've handled in the past conference days. And we were trying to make them fit and make them work like we've always done. And finally it hit me and I'm like, wait. I've been saying to all these schools, we can't keep using old ways with new problems. I said, we've learned how to make asynchronous learning work. So why do we have to close school for a conference? Why can't that maybe have one day closed and one day is asynchronous learning day where the kids have work in Google Classroom that the teachers have prepared them for the day before. And then that next day they're working and they have work to do. And when the teacher comes back, we're going to follow up on that work. And we were all like, yeah, why didn't we think about, because again, our minds are just conditioned to do things like we've done them for 150 years, but there are lessons that we've learned from this new, COVID has had a lot of bad, but everything hasn't been bad in that. And so how can we take the positive that we've learned, like you're saying, and then use that to support where we are?
Love it.
I want to say something. I promise I'll be brief, but I think that we're missing the community approach that it's going to take to get us to really focus on student achievement. And I think this is a really great opportunity for us to explore partnerships to make sure that we aren't missing a certain segment of our population. How awesome would it be, since we're able to partner with ACC, to have a leisure services break camp that focuses on test prep or a remediation course or something throughout one of the summer breaks or school breaks, or partnering with our local Walmarts and Kroger, so that students who may not be going to college, especially thinking about some of our exceptional students, so they can still find workplace readiness by stocking and learning how to be greeters and stuff. So I think it's a really awesome time for us to be able to get creative with our partnerships, really look out to our communities, to our kings and queens, to our nonprofits that are interested in our kids, and give them some resources and training so that they can too support some of our objectives from the school district side.
And I think you'll see that some when Mr. Harris gets to our strategic priority on community engagement. Mr. Davis, did you have something before we move on?
Just a couple of things. In terms of the, of the 80% on third grade literacy, if you go to the granular level, teachers don't go into the classroom and principals don't manage a school on the basis of that. I mean, they are aiming for 100%. And so, I think that that's something that we have to keep in mind, because even if we as a district set goals that are realistic in terms of SMART goals, that doesn't mean that a teacher or a principal walks into the building and says, well, that means 20% of my students can not be successful. Having retired out of teaching, I certainly never approached that year and that way, and I've never known a leadership person to approach it that way. The other thing that, in terms of the goal of being career ready and college and career ready, and this goes along to what Nicole just said, I really I know that Foothills is a separate school, but at the same time, I think it's an important partnership, and I think it. I don't want to steal their thunder, but I think their success also demonstrates our success, because even though a student maybe in the 10th grade or 11th grade moved on to Foothills, but if they are successful at Foothills, and if they move on to higher learning, to me, that is part of what we're here to do. And so I would just just a thought in terms of looking at our students who are at Foothills, and I know they're not technically our students for structurally, but to me, once you're in Clark County, you're always in Clark County until you move out of Clark County. Thank you.
Can I just add something, Dr. Thomas? It's similar to what Mr. Davis and had mentioned earlier, and it will probably come back up as we talk about community partnerships. But I really do see like the goal of 80%. I do get the portion that it's, we have to also understand what part is realistic. But there is part of it, even from that perspective, that can be seen as aspirational, right? So if we are like, well, it's, only 37.2%, then technically that means probably anything over that, and particularly double that, will be aspirational. And so I know that these are like might be philosophical differences. And I also recognize my limitations because I'm not in the classroom. And so there's so much that I don't know. But I do think there's a way sometimes in which expectations can be lowered, or our ways of thinking about things can be lowered, not because we are, like bad people, not because we go in. I haven't met a person that wakes up any day that says, I'm going to just do my work so that 80% of the people will succeed. But I do think that there may be unconscious ways in which this shapes our expectations for students. And I don't know how we get to that, because what Mr. Davis has mentioned is like, and he has more expertise in this area, having retired from teaching. But there are ways in which expectations are lowered. And so I think part of that is us looking at, okay, does this 80%, does it lower those expectations? And I don't know, that's a question for you and your staff, but I guess my feedback for this goal as a stakeholder, as a board member, echoes what has been said. And that is like, I would love to see us, leverage those partnerships that we have with the community. And as a board member would, love to support financially through our budgeting process, any innovative ways that we can, whether it's 100%, I mean, I like 100%, but even if it's 80%, how, what are those innovative ways, be it like through, as you mentioned, asynchronous learning, even through summer programs, or even if non-traditional summer schools, like there are neighborhoods that have, like apartments and community centers, like how do we partner with them? And maybe even if it's something that we need to be responsible for funding, like what are ways that we can do that and almost like address two areas. One is our community partnerships, but then the second one is impacting the reading abilities of our students, because a lot of these places are already doing the work, but they may not have the financial, infrastructure. And so if we may not have the capacity, let's just say, to run a full-blown school during the summer, like figuring out ways that we can support that as a district, but then also as a board member.
Yes. And I do think you'll see a lot of that when we get to the place of having our action steps published. And we've kind of limited that because we were waiting for the board to kind of give us a go ahead just on the priorities. And then we thought we just got to go ahead and start doing some of the work. So we have started a lot of the action steps, and a lot of what you all have mentioned are things that we have already talked about, that I've shared with schools. I've asked schools to be creative. And I think I mentioned this with this group before, of even looking at that with our CARES funding, what we do with after school, what we do with summer school, how we can support community groups that are working with our kids, hiring tutors to go there, working with the university or Piedmont, other places to get content specialists, working with our kids after school or in the summer. So you all will see a lot, and I'm taking a lot of notes, but a lot of what you've mentioned are already in the action plans for various departments.
I hate to keep going on this very first thing that we're talking about, but I had a question about the way that on-level performance is actually measured in the milestones. So I guess I'm wondering how on-level is determined. I know that the milestones, they get a score, and then there's like the 4 different quartiles, or I guess they're not necessarily quartiles. And then 1 and 2 are considered not proficient, and 3 and 4 are considered proficient, and then like above. So I guess I'm wondering how the test works and how it's normed, so that is it actually possible for all students to be at or above grade level statistically? Or is it the case that like, if all 3rd graders scored really high one year, would that shift the bar of what on grade level means? Or is that like a set point?
I know exactly what you mean, and I am making this note, and that is information we can get to you at next week's work session. I can have our assessment team to do just a very short, overview of that and answer some questions around that, Dr. Dykeman. I don't want to speak unintelligently, and understanding data at that level starts to get beyond my zone of expertise. And so I want it to be an accurate response for you, but that's something we can bring to the work session as a follow-up to this week's meeting.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because I was just wondering, like, is it like a zero-sum game in Georgia? Right. So that if Clark County students, if 100% of them are above grade level, does that mean that some other students in some other district are now below?
Right. I'm with you exactly. Yes, I will find out for you, and we will have that information. Mr. Harris, I guess you think we just got rid of you, don't you?
No, I'm taking notes as well. And I'm actually really excited that everybody is pushing for the community collaboration side. One thing I will note is, we didn't have a community collaboration goal in our previous plan. So it's really important. I think that shows that is our focus as a district, and you as the board, that we want to collaborate with our community. So when I get to priority 2, I'm really excited that, we're already talking those strategies. Goal number 2, maybe have some of the similar comments. Now this one says 90%, but 90% or more of 8th grade students being high school ready. Currently, we are at 75.8%. Our state average is 82.9. And again, these are just some of the strategies that have been listed, very high level view. We have not really teased out all the strategies that are going to impact and move this needle in this one goal. But this is kind of the note doc where we just kind of start to really tease out what are some of the ways we're going to move the needle in that respective area. So this is not at all a comprehensive list, but I'll stop there if there are any questions before I move on to the third one, or should I just go on to the third one?
You can go ahead.
I think you're going to have the same concerns about all of these numbers. That there's one that's 100% good.
Yep, 100%.
I'm there. But I'm going to have that same question, so I won't flesh that out now, but definitely on the high school, because that's, they're so close to that right now. I'm like, okay, this is good.
So 100% of high school, as you said, graduating college and career ready, which kind of captures the overall entire descriptor of this area of student achievement. So we are at 40.9% now, state average being 56.8. And again, some strategies have been listed for how we plan to get there. So that is kind of that's student achievement. That's the goal number 1, or priority number 1. There's still 4 more.
Is there going to be like a section that defines what college and career readiness is?
A section like
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 if
maybe like
this
a
were a
definition?
book, like a preface.
Like, what's the
If you look at the
definition
baseline
for?
description,
Hmm.
the baseline description begins to do that. Readiness indicators, entering technical college or university system without needing remediation, a readiness score on ACT, SAT, or AP test, end of pathway assessments, or work-based learning programs.
So college and career readiness is based on college readiness.
And career ready. So I think that's where the end of pathway assessment and the work-based learning program.
Work-based learning.
That's how they're measuring. And it's based off the CCRPI is kind of how we tied it into it. So the College and Career Readiness Performance Index. So we took that. This is the way that the state measures how each district in the state is called, whether our students graduate college and career ready. So we use that as our metric, the same metric the state's using.
So will CCSD have a CCSD specific, like modified version of how we see students college and career ready? Because right now buying stocks is a really big thing. So if we are preparing students to make money, which is what we're really preparing them to do, like if we were able to better define what that looks like, because sending kids to college doesn't mean they're going to graduate, and putting them on a pathway doesn't mean that they're going to follow it. But if we're producing students who are secure in their abilities to do it, then that looks a lot different. We'll have long-term success instead of being able to say, well, they graduated and we made sure that they were college and career ready based on what the state said we need to do to make sure that they were college and career ready. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I'll echo and just follow up. Like, I'm really interested in where we are now with also making sure that our students who want to go down the path of being an entrepreneur, that they're able to do that. So I'm not sure if it may tie into it. I'm not familiar with the verbiage that y'all are pulling from, but just making sure that they have a broad array of options, whether it's college, military, straight into the workplace, starting their own business, that they are able to truly define what they want to have happen. And then we as a district are able to help them achieve those goals.
And so that means that we will be moving away from the standardized things that the state uses to measure all school districts. And I definitely see a value in my mind for us to have some measurements that aren't necessarily, we're going to have to report these things because that's who we are and that's who we're part of. But in terms of the things that I'm hearing from you and also from Ms. Gallagher, again, the idea is for every child's individual aspirations, how are we measuring their success in gaining that? And is that something that is a measurement that goes on our strategic plan? And what does it look like? And how does it begin to define the ideal student that we want to graduate? I guess is the question that I would ask.
I've got one just side comment. With the students will take ACT and SAT as 11th graders. There's a movement, and maybe this is too granular for this meeting, but the colleges are moving away from that, and I think traditionally, certain groups of students have not shown their college readiness through those tests. And so I think the pandemic has encouraged colleges to move away from those as instruments. And I don't know if they'll go back to them or not, but I'm just wondering if that's a dated measurement, but I'll leave those to people who know more than I do.
Well, even beyond that, also the workforce readiness assessments that employers for kids who are not going to college but are ready to enter the workforce right out of high school, those are some of the priorities, I think, for the learning achievement in the technical education world for sure. So yes, I agree with you that I've read a lot about colleges and moving away from those as entrance criteria. They're totally moving away from that. Don't know that I've picked up anything that says they're going to abandon it entirely. I think it's going to weigh less because, again, it's not measuring
I think the reality has come to us that we are not, we're testing on skills that are obsolete, if you will, or on systems that are obsolete. And so we need a different kind of testing to actually define whether somebody's ready. That's what I pick up from my discussions and my readings.
And now just, not to beat a dead horse, I want that horse to die, but I want us to be flexible as we go into this new chapter in life, because right now, a college degree doesn't have the same assurance for a job post-COVID as it did pre-COVID. And there are many people with those degrees who felt like they had job security that aren't able to get work. And so I just want to make sure that as we just move into this next chapter, that our students, our kids are solid, and the critical thinking skills are there, the financial literacy is there, so they can hit the ground running and what this new era is going to look like, because I think it's going to be very different from what we're used to seeing and just what we consider college ready and career ready.
And really quick before we go on to the next thing, one other thing that I've seen, and I don't know if it's just trending, but the programs that, so I'll use welding because that's the one I'm most familiar with. So programs that are offered at the community level, I don't know where to, maybe on the community piece, added in there to strategically create partnerships with organizations that, that give like the 6-week training in the certificate so that you can get a job. So the push now is, and I know I said it like in other conversations with a few of y'all, and I'll use Malachi as an example. If Malachi drops out of school, he can go get the 6-week certification and start work. So partnering with organizations or businesses who are offering that level of training and making sure that dropping out of school in order to get that certification so that they can start working is not something that is presented to our students as an alternative to education or making money, which is what their goal, like what this one talks about at post high school, or stopping high school earlier so that they can go ahead and start making money. But maybe that's under strategic partnerships, but like making sure that we're partnering with people who are offering alternative forms of education so that people can get to where they want to, so that our students can get to where they want to go without having to be bored in school.
And some of that might fall under as we look at the classic city model as well.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Mr. Harris.
I got it. I'm writing fervently over here.
Me too.
So strategic priority number 2, community collaboration. The descriptor there is engaging families, community members, and civic organizations as active partners. Personally, really excited that we have this priority. Like I said, our last plan, I did a control F and didn't have community in it at all. So it's great that we have a plan that actually has a priority area that's dedicated strictly towards making sure we collaborate with our community. Our first one is increase the opportunities for families and for family and community engagement and student learning. What I will say is most of these, because we have not done a lot of preliminary surveys or metrics for these, we are developing our own survey instruments to measure how do our families feel when it comes to engaging with our schools and with our district. So some of these will have it to be measured as a baseline data because we haven't necessarily measured it. So we are in the process of developing and looking at instruments that we can use to get that feedback from families. But you see some of the strategies. I'm going to do the same as I did first. I'll not necessarily read the strategies, but some of it is basically coordinated around how do we increase voices of populations who may not have historically been heard at school levels and at our district level. And so we want to make sure we're increasing that voice, increasing parent capacity to support students and support learning at home. And then of course, at the bottom, we had a little bit of fun hosting ways to celebrate our staff for the work that they do. To, I guess, answer the question I know you had earlier, there was a question around like, how do we collaborate with community partners when it comes to different community organizations? This would be kind of a cross-functional strategy, because we would essentially combine community collaboration with student achievement. So the work that's being done through the High Demand Career Initiative, as you mentioned, Karina, with these different programs, construction, welding, these areas that we know students can go into short-term certification programs for 6 weeks and come out making substantial amounts of money, $15 to $18 an hour with the high school diploma. With that one is really great for those, for those students, if that's the career path that they choose. So that's going to be a cross-functional area for us. But our goal too is that we want to increase our communication. So we want to effectively communicate about CCSD with students, parents, staff, and community partners. That's a really high level target for us, is to make sure we're increasing our strategies for how we communicate. So one of it is, what methods are we using? I think the board, you all have mentioned, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and using different platforms such as social media and our websites. But as what also included is, how do we make sure we're celebrating and highlighting the different work that is happening at the schools through our LSGTs, through our teaching department, so that way everybody can just celebrate and understand the positive things that are happening within our schools. Again, this is another one. There actually is a spreadsheet. That's what it says, link to spreadsheet, but I removed the link for now because it was internal. So I will get you all one you can see. That's one we use, just to kind of see where are we in our communication strategies, how many people are accessing our website, social media pages, our English language learners, how many of our English language learners are accessing content. So that's there. And then our third one is to increase the capacity and effectiveness of our local school governance teams at the school level. So we actually just finished our first LSGT self-assessment instrument. So we created one actually based off the GSBA self-assessment that you all as board members take. So we crafted our own version of that to measure the effectiveness, and also how do our LSGTs feel they're operating? What are some areas of training and development that they would like to see come from us as a district? And so we have other strategies there, but that self-assessment is going to be how we measure our progress. And as well as having a checklist of items that we want to ensure each of our LSGTs are doing, and not just a simple, post your agenda and your minutes on your website, but also ensuring that the innovations they're coming up with, the impact they're having on student achievement, reaches the board level, reaches their communities, and reaches other schools. Schools can learn from each other. Whatever they're doing at, Gaines can also be learned at Barrow or at HB Stroud, so they can share strategies for how they're moving the needle, student achievement. And of course, there are other indicators we'll be tracking. So definitely want to stop here. I know, give everyone a chance to ask any more questions around community collaboration. We are, of course, excited and continue to work with our community partners and trying to develop a process by which we can make sure we're recognizing our partners for the work that they do with us. So any questions or comments around priority 2 before we go on to 3?
I'm excited to see some measurements around that. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's give feedback I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Nicole.
I was just going to give feedback as a parent. The example that really sticks out to mind is through the Early Learning Center. And I remember there was a parent engagement night where they gave out board games. And I'm like, okay, Candyland is kind of cool, whatever. But when they explain the importance of having 4-year-olds exposed to board games because it helps with geometry when they're in 11th grade. And then I had the ability to go to different teachers and them say, hey, here's some apps that you can stick on your phone. Here's how you can do this and support us at home. And here's some hot dogs so you don't have to worry about trying to cook real fast and get the kids out. That was just amazing as a parent. And so I've loved to see how different schools have been able to do some of these things to help parents be partners and kind of fill in the gap. So awesome job. And I'm looking forward to see it grow.
That's great.
Yeah, I guess I was gonna ask Lawrence, where, and I know it straddles kind of both directions, but I don't, and I'm not good at reading on the computer, but I don't see a clear partnership in terms of industry and the business community, and I know it's there someplace, but I see that as where is that? Let me just.
So it would fall under goal 1. So, I mean, our Partners in Education and Adopt a School initiative that we're relaunching is very much partnering with our faith-based groups, churches, mosques, but also our local chamber is actually the key partner in relaunching our Adopt a School program. So that would fall under this goal number 1 of increasing opportunities to involve family and community. So community was kind of lumping all of those stakeholders into one. So this is the goal of the founder.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is that, like, for instance, this is pre-pandemic, but there were a group of, and I hate to classify people, but computer nerds, geeks, or whatever, that were meeting, at least in one of our schools, teaching, computer programming and that type of thing. And then of course there's the whole internship program that we have. Was that Promising Partnership?
Great Promise Partnership.
Yeah, I mean, I don't clearly see either in strategic goal 1 or 2. Or strategic.
Great Promise Partnership is actually a part of work-based learning programs. They shifted in 2018. So that would be actually under goal number 1 strategy, I guess goal number 3 under student achievement. So GPP, work-based learning, internships, externships all fall under work-based learning now. So they're all kind of measured in that one area. So rather than having separate programs, and part of the reason to make that shift is because it became confusing to have 5 different things for students, and students didn't really know, well, which one am I? Am I, which category do I fall in? So it's now all work-based learning because you at some point still have some type of integration experience with an employer in a business or industry partner. So I hope that answers that part of the question at least.
Well, I guess and then I'll say one more thing. I mean, what I've always seen as a possibility is that, and of course this is again post-pandemic, but if every significant business, if they had a few employees, if they would take on one of our students, we have a very vibrant business community and with all kinds of trades and all types of skill sets being shared. And I guess I go back to, I don't know if y'all are probably too young to remember JTPA, but JTPA is something that I worked with in the summers for years and years through the 90s. And there was just we put students in all kinds of business community, environments, government, private, we did all over the place, and not here, but in another county. And I just, I saw that as so beneficial because I saw the kids before and after having that summer experience. And I'm not saying it's not in here, but I don't know. I don't see it as straightforward as I was hoping.
So I want to remind us again that we have action steps. So you will see some of that in the action steps as well. And I want us to try to keep moving forward a little, but trying to stay, and this is going to sound, okay, so this is me being agreeable as I work on my personality traits. Because you've given great ideas and feedback, but a lot of it are things we are doing. And so trying to remember kind of where the board's part lies and where each individual department's work lies. And just to reassure you that if you don't see it, doesn't mean it's not happening. And that's not just you, Greg, please don't hear that. But a lot of what we're talking about is actually the work of individual departments in the district. And so I want to, some of what you all have said was like, God, I didn't think about that. So you're giving great ideas, but I don't want you to worry that because you're not seeing it at this 10,000 foot view, that it's not happening at the grassroots level. And we will be more than happy, and will not even be happy to, it is our job to let you see that completed document, even though developing those action steps is what happens at the school and the program level. But again, we've kind of been hindered on some of that because we're just having a conversation to really even be able to look at the strategic priorities. And that's when I just had to become a little defiant and say to our team, y'all, it's February. We've got to start doing some of this work. Let's move forward, at least with what we have, and start. But a lot of what you're asking for, people either are already doing or have wanted to do, but we didn't want to get too deep in it because we hadn't even gotten to the place as a board where we could do the initial, can we agree on the priorities and agree on the goals so we can actually start moving to the action steps. And You're right. I mean, you're saying a lot of good things and ideas, and Lawrence and I both are capturing them, but I just want to assure you that that is the work that's happening, but you won't see it here because you're looking for like the actual day-to-day work, and that day-to-day work won't show up in this document. It would show up in our actual work plan with the action steps, key performance indicators, and all of those. And we will share all of that out with you once we can get this approved. So don't fret, Mr. Davis, we're on it for you, I promise. And you know I can't live with Lawrence Harris without being on some of the things you're talking about, because as much as we pulled him out of that world, he eats and sleeps and lives that. And so, and you're right. I mean, all of you're right. We are going to have to approach things differently and utilize those community resources. And I am old enough to remember JTPA and those programs. And I think we're kind of going back full circle. And, you know, I've been reading what you all have put in the chat about, let's just pick up a book and can you read me the book? And I wish that with our charter, you know, we can almost just say, forget these standardized tests, but I do believe there are some ways we can utilize our waivers to do a lot of what all of you've talked about, the financial literacy, the critical thinking skills. And I hear that from my 18-year-old, you know, they are talking about buying stock. I mean, that's their thing now is I made the mistake of letting her hear a conversation today with the insurance company. And I was adding term insurance just to get her through undergrad and grad school. I'm like, okay, if I die, this is what you got here. And she started talking about, oh, I'm going to buy stock. And I'm like, God, she's going to kill me in my sleep so she can get rich. But, you know, I mean, their thinking is very different. And it's what all of you are talking about. You know, it's like, well, why do I need to really go to college? And I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to do this and I want to do that. And I think that's captured what all of you said in terms of how we teach those critical skills. And, you know, she's the first one that'll tell me, she says, y'all didn't teach me anything in school that I can use. Now, I know we taught her something, but we haven't taught her financial literacy. We haven't taught her how to budget. We haven't taught her, you know, how to take advantage of things like stock. We haven't taught her some of the work readiness skills she needs. And so on the one hand, she's right. And I think that aligns to everything you all are talking about in terms of how do we prepare our children to access the world that may be in a way that's not traditionally what we have said success looks like, but that positions them to potentially be a lot more successful than we might have been. And so what are all the different avenues that we can do that? Is that what you said, Mr. Davis?
You summed it up.
And it's on my notebook. I got you. All right, Mr. Harris, there you go.
All righty. So moving down to our third strategy or strategic priority, climate and culture. So climate and culture is about providing a welcoming environment and positive school and district culture for students, families, and employees. So our first goal is that all CCSD schools will provide a climate and culture where it says you, but where students, staff, and employees are valued and welcome to be their authentic self. And so we have our climate survey data here. So you, again, there's a lot that goes into the climate survey, but you can see our numbers. And I thought it was, oh, it is here. It's broken down the baseline. You can kind of see, and it may have been easier if we actually connected it, but each one of these data points is tied towards how, you know, school connectedness, social support, cultural acceptance, school safety, school climate, physical environment, and parent involvement. So every year we give the climate survey. Some of you may have taken on the call. I think we have some parents on the call. You know, and so we're looking to increase those numbers, but regardless of the numbers, we're looking to make sure that students and staff feel welcome and feel like the school is for them and that they are accepted for who they are, whatever that may be. So there are some strategies listed here around PBIS, positive behavior intervention, school leadership being able to communicate with the schools and providing opportunities for parents to learn about what's going on. So the progress indicators are CCRPI. And then the second one is all about being accepted, feeling safe and accepted. One of the things that does not appear here explicitly, but we've talked about adding, again, we're adding strategies even as we go. You know, of course, as Dr. Thomas said, we're one of the board to really look at the high level of the strategy and the goal we've set. But then when we get to the why, I mean, the how we do it, that's what we as staff are always talking about. And so one of the strategies that aren't listed here that we talked about even today was some of the work around disciplinary actions within our schools, school discipline. How does that fit into the picture of school climate and school culture? And so you see, we started adding restorative practices, restorative justice here, attendance, behavior. So we're looking at suspension, attendance rate, truancy rate. That's something we know we need to measure. We want to look at, we want to stay on top of. So that's tied to our goal number 2. And then our goal 3 is all about our employees feeling valued and knowing that they're important in their school environment. So we do have the climate and culture surveys from our staff who take them every year. And we're right around the average of 75, 76%. And so we want to make sure that we get those numbers higher and that we have all of our staff feel valued and they know how important their work is to our school culture, as Dr. Thomas said in the beginning. So that's our climate and culture category, our strategic priority.
So is the administrative staff included in this?
In the school climate and culture survey, Ms. Davis?
Yes, not the school, but is there any assessment from the administrative team?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like I know at the school level, we have this information, right? But what do we have in the administrative level? Finance, budget, physical, transportation. Where is their data captured in terms of the climate survey?
They are not included, I don't think, in the state survey, but we can put that down as something we can easily do ourselves.
Okay, that would be great, because again, I think that I remember just we have a pretty steady turnover anyway in some of those positions, but I just wanted to make sure that we are at least checking in with people, and that might help us uncover some of the things that might be dissatisfying to them.
Yes. And if you all look, Mr. Harris, if you can scroll up just a moment, we did add in here, and we're going to work with Dr. Watley on this goal, but this is where we added also our school safety work. So I think it's on here. Is it on that? Is this the goal? I mean, the priority is in?
This is the priority, but it's not added here. That's what I hadn't.
Oh, no, we're right here on the baseline, I guess, looking at school safety. And so that is one of what Mr. Harris was talking about. So this is where we want to strengthen with her and her team the work that takes place in terms of the trauma-informed care, mental health issues of students, and that crossover between that work and our school discipline. So this is where, Mr. Davis, I see our work teams deriving from for the addressing how we do our safety work and security in the system. So Mr. Harris and I looked at this together yesterday, and he's already reached out to Dr. Watley to say, we do want to change some of the strategies here to ensure that we are addressing our efforts of exclusionary practices, use of force if it had to be, how we're utilizing our SROs, how we're doing that collaboration. So we're going to strengthen that in this area, because this is where you should be seeing that, not just in the action steps, but here in our strategies. And Mr. Harrison identified that as a weak point based on our last couple of board meetings. So he is working with Dr. Watley to make some adjustments here.
Do we have any measurements on these restorative practices? Are we able to determine their effectiveness or their efficiency or anything about them other than an alternative to what we were doing before?
I'm pretty sure the Cedar LSGT has that data. They have shown significant improvement, I think, after they installed the restorative practice.
So is it a district-wide measurement that we have?
I don't think
not all schools are using it at the same level, Ms. Davis. I know Clark Middle has done a lot with it. Cedar Shoals and Whit Davis are the three that have utilized, not that others aren't doing it, because they are, but I think they've been more formalized with their programming.
Okay. So is that something we measure, or do we're using it, and so yeah, my question is, are we able to determine whether or not it's effective as a district, or if we need to do different things with that? I'm just asking that question.
I
I've not
can't
seen any data.
answer that if,
Okay.
yeah.
And I've reviewed, Ms. Davis, I've reviewed some of the grants, the LGT grants for the restorative practices for those 3 schools. And I think, kind of to echo Dr. Yeager, most of the schools have been able to show reduction in disciplinary actions, suspensions, out of school suspension, in school suspension, increase in student attendance. So I know Clark Middle's on year 3 of their work with the restorative practices. I think believe Cedar Shoals and with Davis are entering year 2 now. So the goal would be to see, how that, where the best practices. And I know Dr. Watley's working on kind of a district-wide restorative practice, restorative justice model. So we'll be able to measure it once we put it in place, probably system-wide.
Thank you.
All right, on to number 4. Sorry, Roman numeral. Took me a moment. Number 4, human capital and development is all about recruiting, developing, retaining effective teachers and staff who meet our district's diverse needs. So our first goal was that we were recruiting and increase the number of diverse teachers hired by 10% by FY22. We will, of course, need to, I just recognize I need to update this a bit now that we propose this to be a 3-year plan. But essentially, we want to raise it, I believe, from the numbers at now of 19% to 29% by FY22, which would be next year. And you can see here some baseline data, how many teachers were recruited and hired, and some of the strategies that were used to diversify our teaching and staff workforce. And then our second goal is to increase staff retention by 4% to 89%. And again, you can see our retention numbers, how many of our staff are staying from year to year and are not resigning from their positions. And again, some of the strategies that Human Resources is using to move that needle. And I believe HR actually they have two goals. So there's 2 human capital and development goals. So I'll stop there and give you a chance to read, and I can scroll up and down as needed.
I'm really excited, and you all have read about Dr. Francis that's joining us. Her work in the area of induction and supporting teachers and retention should help to really take us to another level under the leadership of Dr. Blankenship, who's very committed to that work as well.
So I just have a comment, more of a suggestion, just in case it gets lost in all the fluff. I've had several conversations about what diversity actually looks like. And for some communities, like our Spanish-speaking community, what I've heard is diversity in their eyes looks like the person at the front desk who speaks Spanish, but then when it comes parent-teacher conference, they have a hard time finding people who can interpret, and so they have to use their children to interpret, which doesn't always work, nor is it it's not fair. So making sure that when we are talking about diversity, we are not just talking about the one person in the school building that speaks Spanish and putting all of the Spanish speaking responsibilities on that one individual and not paying them for doing everything that requires them to use those dual skills.
Yes. And I'll tell you, from being at J.J. Harris and having had the highest Latino population, I actively sought, and you would be amazed, that's one of the areas we really need to push our children in, just in being bilingual, and also pushing our Spanish speaking students into the field of education. Finding candidates who are bilingual is such a challenge. I mean, every year I would have like 110 people come to our table for hiring, and I might have 1 or 2 that spoke Spanish. It was so challenging to find candidates that we're able to meet that skill set. So you're right, it has to continue to be a priority.
There's one other thing, Dr. Thomas, and
Yes.
and I'm very mindful of what you just told me or told us a few minutes ago. But I don't. One thing that was really innovative that I don't see here, but I know it's there, is growing our own.
Yes, yes, and so that initiative should still be in the action steps, but I'm going to make a note to just make sure it's there, Mr. Davis. That should be part of what Dr. Francis' work will continue from Mr. Harris, but I'm making a note. Mr. Lawrence Harris, we're going to have a day just to sit down together and go through and make sure.
Oh, trust me, I'm already looking like we're gonna have to get some time on the calendar to.
Yes, we just need a work day to go through. This is great suggestions.
But I say really good stuff, so we appreciate it.
Yes.
Can I add something potentially to the conversation going back down up?
Yes, ma'am.
To human capital or whatever that goal is. So when we talk about increasing the percentage of underrepresented teachers and staff in the school system, I think that there also needs to be a larger discussion about preparing the entire district for that increase in the population of underrepresented teachers and staff. So creating a parallel sort of effort to increase that group, but also increase the positive climate and environment with which they work in, because that will then yield that retention rate that you're looking for, because we can recruit all we want and bring them here. And this is evidenced by UGA every single year, but they will leave if the climate does not support them. And if the infrastructure is not built alongside that increase in the population to support their growth and encourage their potential and development. So I think that needs to also be highlighted alongside that increase, is how we're going to nurture and support that population within the school system.
So one of the things we found with a lot of our candidates coming from UGA is a need for working with culturally different populations. We've really worked to focus on the importance of being able to build relationships, the importance of having strong, positive discipline strategies. And that's something that, even our new teacher candidates have come in and said that they did not receive a strong background on in their education programs. So you're exactly right. So really, how do we nurture our staff okay. Yes.
All right. Down to our last one, the moneymaker, literally. Fiscal responsibility. We have to be responsible with the funds. So we want to manage and protect public funds and assets through efficient and effective use of available resources. So our first goal is to maintain a cash reserve to cover unanticipated deficiencies in revenue or unanticipated expenditures. I'm just gonna stop there. The finance piece is not my world, so I will allow you to breathe. I know my strengths. And goal 2 is that we want to ensure that the budget is aligned with strategic priorities as conveyed by the district. And then there should be one more here that is all around, or 2 more. One is facilities related, but goal 3 is to safeguard assets through up-to-date financial policies and procedures. So that's our FISC assets, attendance, training sessions for bookkeepers, schools, school leaders around how to manage the funds through our, currently our system, I think, is Munis. And then our goal 4 is to improve and upgrade district facilities to meet our current, and then we put projected needs as well for future facility needs and future facility use. So, and then under here, you also see one thing that's different. I do want to highlight for the board under this goal around facilities, you can see where we are as it relates to SPLOS 5 projects. That's important data to see how many projects were funded and which projects are complete and which ones are still have not started. So I do want to point that out as some of the data.
Lawrence.
Yes, sir.
The one thing when we talk about facilities, and I've said that before at the COC meetings, but one thing that I feel like that is, in fact, I saw the idea of community schools throughout the strategic plan, but not directly. And but when we talk about facilities, I know that the main purpose of our school buildings are to educate our students and protect them and protect our staff and that type of thing. But I do think that in terms of when we look at properties, how our buildings, if they are community accessible, and I want to give you a couple of examples. One thing that back when Winterville was being built, they put the family engagement room up front and in a place that was very easily accessible. And I was glad to see Hillsman. When we built Hillsman, we also created that with that big staff development room you still had to go into the building, but it was a quick ride. I don't know if when we start talking about facilities, if we are real conscious of, though, however, of making them community accessible. And so I simply raise that because it's a concern of mine about what a community school looks like. And it's not just what our intentions are, it's also the actual physical structure of the building. So anyway, just a thought.
A good point. I've added that too, Mr. Davis. And I know that's in part of our plan with Envision Athens is the use of schools as community spaces and supporting that work as community schools. And I saw where Dr. Gant said we were almost out of time, but I think we've really hit the key areas, and that's a good ad that I've captured on here, Mr. Davis. And I think probably this is the most clean cut one. It's not we can do things with money, but I think this is about how we prioritize our spending. And the bigger thing is ensuring that our spending is aligned with what we say our priorities are, and that we're not, purchasing a lot of extra things that don't align with where we say we're trying to go. So, Mr. Harris, I appreciate you being here again this evening. I really appreciate all of the feedback. I think between the two of us, we probably have about 5 pages of notes. So that's good. I want to get with you and we can synthesize all of this feedback that we've gotten, and I will make sure that we have information and updates on the areas we could not answer for you next week at our work session. And if you all have anything that you didn't get to say, you can always shoot me an email, a text, a call, and because we want to make this a strong plan so that it's something that we are actually using for our work. So, thank you all.
Thank you. This is really good. I appreciate the depth that we took. That was just the right level, and it covered everything that we said is important. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you again, Mr. Harris.
You're welcome. You all have a good night.
Tomorrow? This is not happening tomorrow? I had a whole half-day retreat on my schedule for tomorrow. Is that
we're happening. He's just not here because he doesn't have to be here.
Yeah, he's
okay. I see.
You get to be blessed with my presence, though, Dr. Anderson. You get me again.
But Lawrence, you could bring the donuts.
Look, he already left us.
We already left.
Lawrence was like, "See you later."
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Thomas and board colleagues. I think it was a really good discussion. Yeah, I just want to echo if there are any additional, if there's additional feedback or questions, to, just be sure to reach out directly to Dr. Thomas. Dr. Thomas, before we transition to the next item, is that all for your area?
Yes, ma'am. That's it. Thank you. This was great. I'm excited just about starting the work, like really doing the work. We want to do the work. And I'm really ready for COVID to leave so we can do the real work and stop spending so many hours every day trying to make education fit in these current times. But thank you all for this input. It was great. And we will get this all cleaned up and get it back to you.
Thanks. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we're definitely in crisis response mode.
Yes.
Seems like we've sort of been here for 2 years, so we're looking forward to focusing in on direction.
And I want to make sure you all heard Mr. Harris say he will be participating, I think, in 3 different school districts have graciously agreed, who people have identified to us as having strong, not just strong plans, but strong ways of monitoring those plans and getting feedback to their board and their constituents. So we're really excited about him. And now, that everything's virtual, it's cheap because he doesn't have to go anywhere. So they're giving him links and he's getting into those meetings to help us be able to improve our work. So that's it.
So, yeah, I heard the magic word dashboard, and so I'm relaxing now. Okay, so my stress level went way down. I'm feeling really good.
I actually said to him, make sure for Ms. Davis, you talk about the fact that we're working on a dashboard. So
I'm sorry.
We know you all's personalities and things that really excite you and make you tick. So we're on it.
You can't beat that for transparency, and that's a big, big deal. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we will move forward with our last item on our agenda here, which is item number 6, and that is gathering stakeholder data. And we're sort of going to cover 6.1 and 6.2 at the same time. So if you see 6.1 is determining how we would gather stakeholder data, but then also 6.2 is reviewing the cognitive directive discussions, GSBA correspondence. And so I have shared that information. I know that, we have our self-assessment that we completed. We also have the cognitive report, and that's really where this conversation was birthed. That's where it came from. We started, when we received that directive. And then I also shared with you just some communications from GSBA. I think it was maybe Justin and maybe Dr. King on that correspondence. And so to just give a brief recap, our directives from Cognia involve gathering stakeholder data. And so because it was a directive, it was not optional. So the goal was for us to figure out how we're going to go about doing that. At one of our work sessions, we discussed that there was general consensus that we would follow up with GSBA because they do offer this service as a way to get help. And so that conversation with GSBA resulted in them sending us like what it would look like. I also shared with the board some details about that conversation in an email. And so really where we are, so fast forward to last month. No, wait, we're in January, right? I can't remember. Our last conversation with Cognia, when they came to visit and to follow up for the review, there have been no like official like responses or findings or anything like that. But one of the more informal conversations was they expressed, I think it was Dr. Schaefer expressed that it doesn't have to be, it does need to be a formal process, but it does not have to be necessarily an expensive process. And then also being sure that we use really the resources that we have in place. And so they were not, of course, opposed to us partnering with GSBA. And if you recall, Dr. King, in our earlier conversations, suggested as one of many options to work with GSBA or to create our own, to use Cognia's, their platform to actually create our assessment of gathering stakeholder data and align that basically with our self-assessment, but we're asking like our community partners. And so the reason that this is on our agenda is so we can basically decide, do we still want to move forward with GSBA? Do we want to pull in Dr. Thomas and use the district resources to create our own just sort of simple assessment that really is aligned to our self-assessment, and to use the groups that we already have in place and grow from there. One of the reminders too in that conversation was, this isn't a one-time thing. So what we're building needs to be something that we can do really forever, gathering stakeholder data, but then that we can have continuous improvement around. And so, for instance, we may add additional groups, or, what that looks like, especially post-pandemic, might look a little bit different. But the most important thing being, we need to start somewhere. And so that is why that's on our agenda for us to talk about. How do we want to proceed? And basically then to take the steps towards that. Dr. Thomas and Dr. Maddox, did I leave anything out as far as the rationale of why that's on our agenda?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
So I'm going to open up the floor. If there are, if you have any strong discussion points or feelings around this. The good part is that we do have the resource, we have Dr. Thomas, and who has also included Dr. Barlament on a lot of our work. Bless him. He probably feels like he's a part of the board. But he's done, Dr. Thomas and earlier on, Dr. Ezekiel and Mr. Barlament pulled together really the framework for us to be able to get all of the data for our, I was going to say COVID report, our Cognia report. And so, yeah, we just need to decide how we're going to move forward. We have the human resources, again, with Dr. Thomas and her team. We also have access to the Cognia platform. And this was also an option that Mr. Barlament brought up. But then we have access to GSBA, and neither of those are mutually, exclusive, but doesn't have to be complicated. We do need to get started. The floor is open for thoughts.
Who has the responsibility ongoing for doing the surveys? Is that going to be the administrative team that'll be doing that? Because we don't have a staff, right?
Right.
And so what are the resources required from the administrative team? I would think that we would make this decision based on the impact to the administrative team for doing it. And so if it's almost like, to me, an RFI that goes out, or kind of that same structure, what does it cost to do it each way that you presented? If we do it ourselves in-house, what are the costs and the benefits of that? If we go with GSBA, cost benefits, the same thing with Cognia, cost benefits. And how much staff involvement is there in getting this work done? Does it require us to hire somebody part-time, or do we have to, do we have a turnkey solution out there that, we can take minimum impact on the staff to do the work? But if it's a part of their ongoing work, this might mean Dr. Thomas growing her staff, I don't know. But those, to me, are the kinds of things that I would want us to address as we look at this.
Could I ask for one tiny bit of clarity on this? I remember, so I'm kind of playing catch up, because I remember this conversation during several meetings before we joined the board, but we weren't involved in the back end of any of this. So I'm just kind of trying to play catch up at this point. When you talk about doing this sort of community stakeholder survey, are you trying to collect multiple points of data for to answer a lot of different questions, or was Cognia saying do a community stakeholder survey for these one or two particular things?
So I'm going to share here. I'm going to try to. Okay. Is everybody still there? Okay. Let me try this again. To answer your question in part, Cognia, if we go back and like, this is a very this is the synthesized version of that report. But if you go back to the directives, overall there were 5 areas, and there were 3 of the areas, the findings that were directly related to the board. And those 3 areas were the leadership standard 1.4, leadership standard 1.5, and 1.6. So Dr. Anderson, if you look at the directive number 5 under the standard 1.4, you'll see that the directive was to establish a means to routinely gather and analyze stakeholder data. And then, so that one is the cleanest and most direct one. But then if you go to leadership standard 1.6, you'll also see it sort of talks about gathering feedback, but more so the use of committee structures. And so I think that from my interpretation, there was no like specific area. One of the things that was suggested by GSBA, and I think it was safe to conclude this without it being directly said even by the visiting team, is that they want to know more about our stakeholders' perceptions of how we function. And then that's a very general and broad umbrella. And so one of the easier ways to be able to operationally define our functioning would be to align it to our domains with the Georgia School Board Associations, because that's how we assess ourselves. That's where our self-assessment came from. That's where our self-assessment will come from in the future. And so that was also an option that Dr. King brought up, is that, simply creating not really a self-assessment, but an assessment that really parallels those 8 domains. So to answer your question, no, there was no specific area. It was more generally around functioning. My suggestion and interpretation would be that it would be easier for us to understand ourselves and understand the feedback, to sort of compare that to how we understand ourselves with domains that we're already familiar with. Dr. Thomas and anyone else, please share if you have like a different opinion or any additional information about how you interpreted that.
I think that you summed it up to me based on my understanding of what we received from Cognius.
I'm probably at maybe a ground zero level. It seems to me that the stakeholder data feedback would be based on the basis of the complaint, and that was the board's dysfunction. And so if I were looking to figure it out in terms of what would help us identify that dysfunction that the community and our stakeholders could give us input on, I really like the idea of basing it around the domains, but now we're talking about what's going to be in that survey, I think. So I'm not sure yet if we've had any real discussion on the method of building the survey. And then I think that it's a very solid foundation to do it around the 8 domains that would, 7 or 8 domains that would allow us to become a board of excellence or a board of distinction as measured and defined by GSBA. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that is generally, when we do our self-assessments and professional development, those are the domains that we work to, operate within.
And so we would be asking the stakeholders to evaluate us on their perception of our performance within those domains. And so that's the specific thing that we would be looking for, Dr. Anderson, is how the stakeholders perceive our behavior in those regards.
So could this be as easy as offering our self-assessment questions to the broader community? I mean, that's really all we're asking, right? We want to know their perceptions of our function. It's identical to our perceptions of our function, right? The only thing that would concern me is when I answered that self-assessment, I found it difficult I needed more specific questions. Like, it was a very, very broad category, and I had feelings about part of the category and different feelings about a different part of the category. So if we were going to design it, I would want to make it a little bit more, allow for more detailed comments than just those 8 questions that we got. Because at the time I didn't realize how extensively you should answer those questions, like some of us did. Anyway, it just seems like it's a no-brainer that we just ask the community what we asked ourselves.
It may, and again, if I'm not mistaken, we were pretty hard on ourselves, right? and so is it because we were trying to understand the questions, or do we have an expectation that the communities would be able to interpret those questions differently? And are their needs the same as our needs? I mean, we have the sworn duty as an elected official to do certain things. That is not the role of the stakeholders, right? Their job is to elect us to do those things. So I'm wondering if there might be some distinction or differentiation there. So our role is fairly well defined, at least by law, but how we execute on that role is the thing that I think the survey is going to speak to.
And if you recall, there's a longer version, but because of like time and we had just so many things on our plates, that shorter version, we use the shorter version. But certainly if we build our own, depending on who's building it, I don't mean to, volunteer you, Dr. Thomas, or any part of your cabinet, but certainly I would think that this could be an opportunity for an ad hoc committee working just simply to help in any way possible to get the survey done. Again, with keeping in mind that this is the start. That doesn't mean that this is the only way. Who knows? Next year we may decide to do quantitative and some type of other follow-up, focus groups or things like that. But we do have to get it started. But I do think it can be as simple as having someone, whoever that someone is, be it Dr. Thomas, Mr. Barlament, 1 or 2 people, look at those questions, tailor those questions using Cognia's platform that we already have access to, and building it and sending it out to a group that already exists and growing from there. Each year, according to our Cognia report, each year we'll, twice a year actually, it was a directive for us to do self-assessments. And so that means that we'll probably need to be doing another self-assessment around summerish to get us, back on track. And so actually maybe before summer, because I'll have to remember when we did our other one. But I say that to say there always be room for improvement and to add to, like what we do. But I really do think it can be fairly simple, and it can, grow and improve from there.
And Mr. Barlament is very skilled in that area. And because he's been working with us on Cognia and talking back and forth to them and different people, I think he's comfortable kind of knowing what it is they're looking for. So I think he would be good with helping us to kind of move forward. And if he needs additional support or resources, then I'm sure he'll be comfortable letting us know that as well.
I had to step away, so I only heard a part of Ms. Davis's comment. But if there is going to be a community like assessment or feedback or something, if there could be like a push initiative or something to make sure that people who are judging us in our positions actually know what our roles and responsibilities are. Because I can't imagine being in a position where someone is saying, well, she don't go over there to the schools and tell the principals, well, that's not my job. So making sure that people understand who and what it is that they're being asked to make a comment on, so that they can make and give informed inputs and opinions, and not just broad and general ones based off of their assumption of what it is that our role is as board members, if that makes any sense.
I like it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and it reminds me of this. I think I said this before, because this whole thing reminds me of like having students evaluate your teaching. And a lot of what you get is whether they like you or not, or whether you've like done something specifically that they didn't like, versus how effective your teaching really is, because they don't really know how to evaluate how effective your teaching is. And I think it's going to be the same thing with stakeholders and how the board is doing. But if there is some way to give them some of that information ahead of time, so that they understand what the role of the board is, and then can evaluate us based on these domains. I mean, I think we're still going to get, it also sort of makes me laugh, because we have a way of getting perception of our stakeholders. They come to the meetings and tell us what they think of us all the time. But I know that's not what we're actually looking for. But if we could somehow have this survey be useful in that way, that people have an understanding of what the board is supposed to do, and then be able to say whether they feel like we're doing that or not.
And that's why I wanted to. I especially want the breadth, if you will, of the survey of the community that they survey, to not just be those people that have an issue with the district. Again, so when we talk about people that we normally hear from, we know what that's going to be like a lot, and that's not what we're trying to find out. I think we're ideally trying to understand what would be the community's desire for its model board, I guess, or the work that we're doing. And are we doing the work that they think we need to be doing to do our job of educating K through 12 students? So that to me is where I would like to see us. And I have to go back and look at the domains again. I think they're mostly neutral, but I think, again, there might be some things in there that would be, I think they'll be fine. I'll have to look at those again to be sure. And again, I'm happy for the district to do this work, but again, because it is ongoing work and it's continuous work, and you already do that with the climate surveys and things of that nature, I'm fine with that too. And thank you, Dr. Thomas, for reminding me that Mr. Barlament will definitely tell you if he needs additional resources. And so then the question becomes, is that something that, is that the least expensive way to do that, to have it happen here? And does it give us a little bit of arm's length from those, from the questions and the data coming back into the district? And are we comfortable with that? Or do we want to do something that takes it totally outside of the district so that everything can be evaluated?
That's a very good question, Ms. Linda.
And to Tisha's point about the way that we did our self-assessment and how we basically gave a rating for each domain in total, and how that was kind of difficult to do. I agree with that, but I would be hesitant to ask the community to do more than like 8 questions and have them go more in detail, because I just don't know how many people would respond to it. But I do wonder if, I think we were asked like to say whether it needs improvement or whether it was, I can't remember what the word was. So there were only 2 choices. It was either that it was good or that it needed improvement. So maybe if we could have more of a range of how the community scores us on the domains, then maybe we might get more information, because everything could always use improvement. So just having those 2 options really doesn't give us that much information.
Is community,
we're not the only person. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Corinne.
Is community just parents?
I don't think so. No.
No, I think it's whoever we send it to. But my question is, we can't be the only district that's doing stakeholder surveys. And so, do we have any information from GSBA or from Cognia or anybody that can show us what one of these things looks like, or are they trying to suggest that we are so unique that we've got to do something different than what might be out there that we could buy off the shelf?
And I was surprised, Dr. Gant, that GSBA didn't kind of have something already, like just a set canned assessment, but they didn't seem to.
No, they didn't.
Well, then they're not the ones that I would use. That goes with somebody who does this for a living.
Well, GSBA has done, I didn't ask for the examples, the sample stakeholder surveys, but I know that one or two school districts, and I say I use recently very loosely, and one of those school districts I think had done one as a result of similar concerns with accreditation. And so, yeah, they didn't have like a template, so to speak, but I didn't get the idea that Cognia wanted I did get the idea that they wanted us to do something, and they did not want that something to seem so overwhelming that we couldn't get started. And so, yeah, but they didn't have a lot of templates, but they had, I think it may have been 2 schools, and I'm blanking. I'll have to go back and check my notes because they told me the names of the schools that GSBA had done the work with. But I think part of this too just speaks to the fact that people use different ways to gather their stakeholder data. It's just that it was recommended, a district can decide to gather their stakeholder data as far as how well they're functioning within the domains without ever going through GSBA. They could just use those domains and, create their own assessment. And so it didn't seem that it is some sort of like best practice that you have to go through GSBA to create the survey, but certainly that I do think it's reasonable to think that you would at least assess how you're functioning within the domains that school boards across Georgia are expected to function within.
I guess I would really like to find out, because I don't what GSBA does do, because I don't know how you tease out the board versus the district. I mean, the school board could be dysfunctional as hell, and yet the district is running very smoothly. And I don't know how you tease out one from the other. And so that's why I just need to know what that looks like. And I don't know. I mean, I know even as a teacher, and even working for the district in Clark County, I never followed the school board. I never knew what they did. So I guess I don't, and I was and I was there, I went to a meeting or two, but, so I'm not sure how you tease out the school board from the school district. And
so, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying, I want to see what that instrument looks like, and I want to borrow it from somebody that says, oh yeah, this is how you tease that out, and I'll be happy with it.
And I'm not sure that the directive says that we have to tease that out. I think it's saying, you just don't have any input from your stakeholders on how you're performing, and if the district overall is the board as well as the district, then I'm kind of with you on some of that in terms of, how do we make that distinction, and how will we then take this stakeholder input and lay it against the climate surveys for the individual schools, which we do survey, right? And then also look at the factor in the administrative team. So again, I'm not sure what we're surveying. I know that we don't have a stakeholder survey, and so the stakeholders sound to me like that's really a bigger picture than just trying to get granular into a particular program or something that we're doing.
I mean,
act.
And I agree with you. And of course, where this came from is the fact that our meetings were not pretty. I mean, and that is where we publicly display ourselves as a board, is in public meetings, and it wasn't a pretty sight. And so we got downgraded because of that. So, but how many people saw that you know, that ugly side of the board, so to speak, and
care.
Yeah.
So, there you go. I hear you. So I think that anyway, I think I've said enough, but I don't have any new thoughts.
So I don't know about all the logistics, but I do have some concerns that I've seen with surveys that go out. So if the questions that are asked, if they could please be asked from a strengths perspective, I think that would be great, because a lot of times what I've seen is when you ask questions from a deficit perspective, or a critical perspective, even if someone thought that we were fine, when they leave the survey, they're figuring out ways that we are bad or not so great. So if we could do that to train people's brain to find the good, and then that way, because perspective is everything. And if we are asking questions, you know, why not pull the good out of the conversation? And then if they add something that's not so great, then those are things that we can work on. Because I wasn't here when I wasn't on the board when all the rest of that mess went on, which is probably what people are going to be holding on to. So if we could start off on a nice page, because I am new and I don't know about it. I mean, I know about it, but I wasn't here. That would be great. At least just for me, please. Thank you.
Dr. Thomas, can I ask you just a quick question? Do we have control of the climate surveys per school? Or is that come from the state and we just pour it out?
Comes from the state, and we have a required participation rate that we have to have as part of our CCRPI scores. Now, we can give additional surveys. It used to be a time when there were surveys also done regarding teachers and their performance, but then those were gotten rid of at the state level. But currently the climate survey is a state survey that is given out.
And so we can't add a question to it.
Right. Now we could create our own survey.
Yeah, I'm just trying to add on to what we're already doing.
Right.
I would like one question out there, and that is the school board supporting with the work of our teachers and staff and school administration, you know, up or down? But if there's any way if we can't add on to that survey, then that would shoot that thing in the foot.
So maybe
forward by them. Sorry, Dr. Gann.
So I'm thinking it's 8:52. And we have a few options. We can move forward. The last time we discussed this, we said we would inquire and make an inquiry of GSBA, and they've sent us back the information. We can decide to go ahead and move forward with that. We can decide to create our own. I mean, the options are still the same. But we do need to start. So again, that's why we just wanted to bring it back to the board, because if there is any change where we may be creating our own, or actually even if not, if we're going to be moving forward with GSBA, those are things that we need to be doing now. So like with the stakeholder survey, not as concerned about the stakeholders. I think we have many stakeholders that will be happy to share their opinions, but we need a survey. We do need to have a tool, be it a tool created by GSBA or a tool created by us. And so in our last couple of minutes, I just need to have an idea, because that will also help me decide if I, need to, if we need to, at some point have a small ad hoc committee to be sure this work is done and complete by a certain timeline, or, or if not, but we do need to move forward on it. So
I would like to suggest that we
have
give
as much, if I may just add, Ms. Davis, we don't have as much time to keep gathering information. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but we have been talking about it for a while. And so we do need to make a step, and there will always be questions that we have. There will always be ways that we can improve. And we'll seek to do that throughout these next couple of years. Well, several years, but that's beyond, some of us, but we do have to start somewhere.
So I would suggest that we give this to Dr. Thomas and let her, through her administrative duties, come up with the solution for us. She does that for everything else that we do in the district. I don't see this as being any different, especially if she has to support it going forward.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Davis.
I just wrote in the chat my idea that I support an ad hoc committee to do this, to get it done.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Yeager. I'm just going to go across my screen. Mr. Davis, any additional things to add? No. Okay, Dr. Dykeman.
I'm going to show my high agreeableness and say that I think that either way could work. I think that there are benefits to going through GSBA, but if it really is as simple as just asking the questions that are on the domains, and then we can see what kind of feedback we get back and then tweak it for next time if that's not helpful feedback. So I think I'm fine with either way.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ms. Hall.
I actually echo Dr. Dykeman. I don't have any aversion to doing an ad hoc committee, but I think that there could be benefits to going that route or going the other. So not sure if that helps any, but I'm agreeable.
This is when we start looking for our people that were like low on some of those characteristics, right? Not high on agreeableness. Dr. Maddox.
Okay, I got you. I see that.
Oh no, actually, I was just going across my screen.
I know. I'm teasing you. But basically, I mean, I agree with Ms. Davis. If Dr. Thomas, if she already has some general idea where she thinks this would be best done, then, if she just shared that with us, I think we support her. Personally, I feel that everything that's going on, I mean, we talking about a time frame. Why not go ahead? I agree with Dr. Anderson with GSBA this time around. Get the work done, and then, in the background work for if we do this again next year, then, Dr. Thomas' team, they may have more time, but I don't want to speak for her team and what they have time to do or not do. But, I'm just thinking about all that we've done this year or last year. And if GSBA have the tools already there, that's it. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Maddox. Ms. Gallagher, any additional?
I'm gonna say, as long as we get it done, I think that's great.
Okay, all right, cool. Thank you, Ms. Gallagher. Ms. Davis, any additional?
No, I still feel strongly that it's the superintendent's work to do. Team member number 10. And she can pick however she wants to do it. If she needs a committee, I think she can ask for a committee, but she can also use her staff.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Dr. Anderson?
I mean, so I see the value in just sort of laying it to the feet of Dr. Thomas, and if she wants to, just seeing what she wants to do. But I also see the value in just working smarter and not harder. And if someone else already has this tool available and we can get this done quickly and efficiently, then why not just do that? So I don't know. I'm just kind of about going forward and just letting it be done.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Baby. He talks a lot too. He's an extrovert.
Yay.
I love those baby giggles. That's everything.
I know. So I'm Dr. Thomas and Ms. Palmer, because, like everything that we do sort of impacts, it falls, to Dr. Thomas and Ms. Palmer inevitably, like this, whether it's GSBA or with district staff. So any thoughts from you all?
So I will say, when I mentioned earlier GSBA not having one, I guess I was thinking like already kind of ready, but you're right. That's what Jason can do for us. Is it Jason? Justin.
Mm-hmm.
Justin can do for us is create that tool. And maybe he could work, he and James could work collaboratively on it. Because I agree with, actually, we're all just being so agreeable tonight. But
I know.
I mean, our team, there's a lot of work to be done. We have a lot we're trying to do. We're, behind and trying to accommodate for our normal work on top of accommodating for our pandemic work. Everyone is stretched really thin. And so if this is something that Justin can do, and we know he can, he's already shared that plan with us. I think that James could be our point person from the district office to work. So we're not just like handing it over to them, but working, he would utilize them and their resources and coordinate, but the majority of the actual work would take place with what Justin is able to do. Because I pulled James to do Cognia, and I've kind of pulled him, and we are looking to add just an entry level position. Instead of doing another chief of staff, have someone who's just more of a project manager for us. That's just like a bachelor's level person that's just really strong in some of these areas we talked about: organization, timelines, managing projects. But we're not there yet, and this needs to get done. We're working on a job description to bring to you all, just to have someone to fill in that gap for my position that no longer exists. But right now, and I know, James, we're moving into some kind of assessment season, and he's going to be working diligently with Dr. Ezekiel to be able to have some way to see what our kids have learned during this academic year. So if I don't have to put a huge ask on him by himself, but if it's something that he can work with someone else to do, then I think that would be the easiest way. Ms. Palmer?
I'm always agreeable, so I agree.
She just doesn't let y'all see when she goes to the other end of that spectrum. I get that.
Well, so here's what I hear. We'll move forward with Mr. Polly, and I think Dr. King was in on that conversation, and that Mr. Barlament will be a part of that conversation. And I think that's similar to before, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Thomas. And that will help us build some sort of sustainability, so that as we go away from here, we won't have to always, as we're creating and delivering these surveys and changing them, we won't necessarily have to always go back and, contract with GSBA. But to get us started, that is what I hear us saying. And then that also gives us the freedom, if James and Justin are working together, and at some point, they create a timeline. If we need any additional support or an ad hoc 1 or 2 people to say, hey, if James needs that from our end, we will be prepared to, fill in that way. But what I'm prepared to do, based on what I hear from the board, is I'll follow up with Mr. Polly around Monday, and include you, Dr. Thomas, and sort of get that ball rolling. And for the board, if you can just go back and look at any of the emails that we've sent and things like that, because we have discussed it before, and we will go from there. We'll provide some updates as certain action steps are taken until we get the final product. Does that sound okay?
I think that sounds good. I'd like to make sure that the board gets to review the questions before we commit to that questionnaire.
Yes, I will be sure that I share that with Mr. Polly and James. But I do want to caution us, as we review, and we can talk about this much later when we review them, I want to be sure we're not spending a whole lot of extra hours trying to redo the survey, because if we were going to do that, then we could have been, we could have created the survey. But I'll certainly will share that with Mr. Pauly and and Dr. Thomas and Dr. Mattis in those communications.
And we don't ever get a cost. And so I would like to know the cost of this survey. And again, if it's under the 80,000, of course, Dr. Thomas doesn't need our approval to go forward, but I still would like to know the cost.
Right. So it is under 80,000. I would have to go back. I did send that information out in an email, but it has been a few months, and I do understand that if your memory is like mine, I have really my short-term and long-term memory.
I can't remember that email at all, but I'll go back and look. And I did discover that I'm not on, there was an email list that I was not on.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so I will look again to make sure I have that. But yes, I think again, if it's not 80,000, we're talking about a one-time thing, not 80,000, or we're talking about because we have to do it twice a year, every year, then at some point it's going to hit that number. So let's just make sure.
And I don't even think it was above 2,000 or 3,000, but remember that was an estimate. Right. Either way, it's not above 80, so it technically doesn't even have to come for board for approval. Notification would be great. But I will go back, Ms. Davis, this weekend just to see if I can find that information. And it's an estimate, so the more things we want to do, I think it sort of goes up from there. But he gave us like a base cost that I think was reasonable. And we'll be talking about this more, I think, Dr. Thomas, too, in the future as we talk about the budget. I mean, because there is a cost to, our cognitive journey that, we're just having to include in the budget. And hopefully the more progress we make, those costs will go down. But I will look for that.
I just found it.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah, he told you the estimate was between 1,000 and 1,500. If we wanted something more qualitative, it would be more. But again, still pretty low.
Mm-hmm. And we'll keep you posted, or not we, whoever's doing it, like we'll keep, try to keep the board posted. But and sometimes you may not know the cost or the additions until, like, if we ask for more, if we review. But I think that was a good starting place.
And so does this thing get fed back into our strategic plan? Is that how do we see this outside of these discussions when we get the feedback? Does that show up as again, our climate, our community engagement measurement? Because again, the idea is not to just do it because we had a sighting on cognitive, but to integrate it into how we operate as a board and as a district. So our scores from here will get.
I would think that this would fall now, but this is pretty much a Dr. Thomas question, but I think it would fall under climate and culture. And that's one of from what I can recall, I think that was one of the pieces of feedback that you provided, Ms. Davis, and that is maybe open that area up, right? Not just to schools, but what about our other staffs?
Yes.
To argue, what about the board? Those types of things. So I definitely don't think it contradicts the strategic plan, but I'm one of 10 of us. So
I'm making the ask that it be included because otherwise we'll lose sight of it. Thank you.
Okay. And just speaking of that, before we wrap up, I would see sort of our guiding documents as a school district, the strategic plan, and as a board and superintendent team, our self-assessment, and right now our cognitive report. But even beyond the cognitive report, we will continue to do self-assessments. And remember, in that self-assessments, we had concrete action steps that we won't do all of those. It's not practical, but those are sort of our guiding documents, I guess, if you will. And so I do feel like this work definitely fits with the other two and strategic planning, but I think that would be, more conversation.
Is there a deadline for that survey to go out?
No, it's not. Right now, Ms. Gallagher, they didn't give us a deadline. The directive was that we would determine a way that we would go about gathering that feedback. And so we hadn't we didn't really set a deadline, but I do think, I hope I've shared this before, that, these were the areas that were in progress. So like when we get that report back from Cognia with their findings, this area, as well as our committees area, which is what we're going to discuss, tomorrow, I still believe that those are our areas of growth. And so what I don't think any of us wants to happen is if we get a report back and it's the same areas, that we haven't made additional steps since their visit. So before then we had gathered more information to determine a way that we could gather feedback. And then of course, when we met with them, they were like, well, it doesn't have to be all complicated. And so we just wanted to circle back around to the board to double check. No, there is no timeline that they have set out, but I would say if they come back for a visit, we definitely need to have conducted it by then.
Does GSBA have like community friendly information about what a board is and how it operates, the roles and responsibilities, so that I don't want to put that on the district, but like each of us as representatives of particular districts can go back out to our districts and make sure that the people in our district are informed so that they're better engaged later.
I like that a lot. That's a great question. I don't know.
Yes, I think it's part of the whole thing about they do their competitions where you can become a board of excellence, and there are levels of achievement in terms of how you execute as a board. And I think that those standards are what we typically want to aspire to. We've never even tried to become a board of excellence, but I think that's a great thing for us to do.
I want to be a board of excellence.
Me too.
Yeah. Let's do that.
I think we all do. So it's lining up the want with our continued progress and our continued behavior. But I do think we're heading in the right direction. And that could be something, for instance, as we meet during the summer, that may be a goal of our self-assessment, like to pursue that that designation as a board of excellence. But Ms. Gallagher, I don't know if there's like literature, right? Or like community friendly literature, but I can ask, you can ask, or we can get on the same email, and both of us, I can inquire about that.
Okay. Because I feel like there's not a lot, this sidebar, I feel like there's not a lot that I can do for my district as a school board member because we all are one. But if this is something that I could give back, I think like we need to be taking advantage of those different opportunities to give back to our prospective districts.
Mm-hmm. So, yep. Okay. Yep, we can definitely figure out more about that. Well, it is 9:11, and I want to be sure that I'm respectful of everybody's time. If you think of any additional things, please send us emails, send the whole board emails. We'll start again with this in the morning. We'll be kicked off by an overview. Dr. Maddox will be starting us off after Dr. Thomas calls our roll for us. And so if all hearts and minds are clear, we will move to, we're at the area of adjournment. It's 9:12. I'll open the floor for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Ms. Hall made the motion. Dr. Mattis made a second. Ms. Davis was almost in the second. I don't see any